Hi, welcome to the Broke Girl Society podcast. Today we have a special guest, my friend Terra Carbert. She is the host of the Ambitious Addicts podcast, Beyond the 12 Steps. So you want to say hi?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for coming on. Now, I met Terra early in my recovery. I started to navigate the social media world, and I started to post some content, and I was fortunate enough that she came across it and invited me to be on her podcast, and we've been friends since. Right, you're a huge part of my recovery. So
yeah, ever since that day, two peas in a pod.
We really are, and we're both navigating the social media world in terms of recovery, and so I just thought that would be a good topic for this episode, is to talk about, social media and how it relates to our recovery, how it helps our recovery, how it can deter our recovery, and, just have a nice conversation about that. So,
Perfect.
Your game.
I'm game. Let's do it.
Okay. So when you decided to start your social media accounts and your podcast, what was kind of the drive behind that? Like, what was your ideas when you first decided to start your social media accounts?
Yeah, my first desire and kind of my purpose, my why, the thing that I've defined for myself as kind of the North Star for my life these days, is that I want to demonstrate to anyone who may be suffering or struggling that they are deserving, worthy, and capable of living the lives they dream of living. And when I was active in addiction, I was not dreaming of possibility. And so I really hope to, inspire others and show people through bringing on guests like yourself who are experiencing recovery and growth through recovery, and what good that has brought to their lives, so that maybe that potential addict or the person who is an addict and feeling held back by their past can see that the possibility of the future for themselves is actually infinite. And that's kind of what prompted the start of Ambitious Addicts, was really to focus in on sharing that message with people who have struggled with recovery or an addiction of any sort.
Yeah, that's why you're so great, because you really, you don't define it. You don't define exactly the version of recovery should be. Like, you have a really good understanding that everybody's recovery is different. And I think for you, and I know this is something we've talked about, is I like to focus on kind of the early recovery, because that's where I'm at. I'm in my early recovery. So coming across women who are just starting their recovery and are kind of lost, that's kind of where I kind of like to thrive. I kind of like to help them figure out their footing a little bit. And you kind of like to step in a little bit later, maybe when they're kind of over that hump of recovery and maybe are a little lost on what to do now. Right? Would you say that's fair?
I would say that that's fair in terms of my idea and my plan. But as my higher power often likes to show me, my plans are not are not always the best plans, but that the answers often come in the doing and doing the work. And I am finding that there are people who are still struggling to stop an addictive behavior or want just general recovery from something. Like, we are all recovering from something, whether that's an addiction or we've got some grief or trauma or job loss or you name it. That many women who I've encountered have said, like, well, hey, could you help me too? I'm not a recovering addict. And so in my mind, it was, I got to wait till, about that 1 year mark when somebody feels stuck in their recovery. And I want to show them what's possible as they continue forward in recovery, that there's this amazing life waiting for them in this peace and serenity and all the things that I see as the gifts in recovery. But there's a lot more people than just those who've practiced abstinence from their drug or substance of choice or behavior of choice for a year who seem to want this kind of support. So now I'm a bit more open to what comes. But I would say if I got to pick, it would be people who feel like they've got a solid foundation of their recovery and are wondering what's next and what comes next for them in their life and how to get from feeling like recovery is the focus to recovery with the focus on other goals at the same time.
Yeah, and you're pretty amazing about that. So now let's talk about the actual social media impact. How have you found working on social media or through social media and helping recovery efforts for a lot of different women? Like, are you finding that a good experience? Are you finding that a challenging experience? Like, kind of what are your thoughts, like through your social media, like your Instagram and things like that?
Yeah, my social media thoughts are much bigger and beyond just what's happening in the world of recovery. And the women that I interact with or people that I interact with through my Ambitious Addicts, page or group, or Instagram or LinkedIn or what have you. And I've had to unpack a lot of that in the course of the last couple of years. I think I told you I launched a previous business and kind of failed forward into coaching from that business, and going live on social media, putting a post out there, about what I'm doing was sometimes met with judgment, sometimes met with criticism, sometimes met with opinion that was unsolicited. And that on occasion came from people that were my friends in real life. So there's a lot of different ways that I could come at this, but I would say when I go inside myself for the why am I doing this? All of those other things become less important to me. Like I now am able to accept, like, people are going to be people. This is a public format. People are going to say what they say. They're going to do what they're doing. That doesn't mean anything about me or my intent. Oftentimes people assume your intent when you're putting something out, and that I'm just willing to let them be wrong. In terms of what it's done for my recovery, I would say it's connected me to amazing people in recovery who are working towards becoming that best version of themselves. I've built a new community of people whose goals align with mine or vision aligns with mine. And I have received, feedback from people who said, wow, this thing you did, that really helped me, whether it was a post or a video or a podcast episode or a simple Instagram quote, right? So that's the why, right? For the people that it helps and for the people that it touches in a meaningful way, that changes their outlook either for a moment or for the long term. And that's truly what it's about for me. So it's impacted me in a lot of different ways, but in some ways really exposing some of my own vulnerability and thinking and concern of other people's opinion.
Yeah, and I think we've talked in depth about that quite a bit, because I think we both have had instances where maybe not so much for you because you are further along in this, but especially for me, if I would put content out there, I was always, I think maybe even a couple of times I sent it to you ahead of time, like, what do you think of this? So if you remember back when I was on your podcast, I was pretty, I think I was right around 30 days maybe in recovery, or just shy of it or something for my second go at it. And I was just putting a lot of quotes and things that resonated with me that kind of helped motivate me, kind of took up some time that I was needing to kind of stay busy and just thinking ahead. And so when I started it, it really was just the intent of just staying busy and just motivating myself. And then I slowly would get messages and likes and things like that, and realized that it was helping others too. But then it goes through this little phase, especially early recovery, because you've got this fire in you, like you're finally coming out of this awful hole that you've been in, and especially somebody like me who was in it for 15 years, and you just want to help everybody and everything, and you just have this, I can't even explain the emotion behind it. It's just like this, like you're on fire, and you want to just do all this stuff. And then so I started to kind of reach out there and do more things, and then I kind of got some it would kind of hurt my ego a little bit. It would either feed my ego or hurt my ego. And then I kind of had to come to the place, and you're a big part of this, but I had to come to terms with the fact that I can't, set back my recovery based on those actions. So if somebody was, hurtful or said something that didn't like the content, or I didn't get any response to content, I couldn't let it slow me down. I just finally kind of had to accept that not everybody's going to relate to it. Not everybody's, going to respond to it. And I just have to be comfortable with putting it out there and just letting it go. If it's something I feel, and generally everything I put out is just something that weighs on my heart, that I feel the need to put out, or if it's something that hits me or relates to me. So, and letting that go has been huge for me. Mm-hmm. Huge for my mindset. Because
we had a phone call about this. Sorry.
Yeah, we did, because I was struggling with it, and which is probably why I thought it'd be a good conversation to talk about on this podcast, because it was such an enlightening conversation for myself, and you really have a good way of, kind of making me, we joke about this, set with my feelings and kind of interpret things a different way. You pull it outside of me, and I'm looking at it in a completely different way. So, and with that has actually fueled my social media presence, because I've started more, responding more in the groups. I started my own group, the Broke Girl Society, and I'm not as scared, I'm not as scared. I've started doing just video blogs, and, stuff that probably most people would be like, oh my goodness, what is she doing? But to me, that's just me, and that's how I feel. And I really want to share that part of my recovery with people out there who are still struggling to start their recovery.
Right.
So, but yeah, I think the tough lesson was just learning not to let other people's negative vibes affect me, and I'm not saying
do you remember the question I asked you that day? No. But you've obviously thought about that question and made a decision, which is really critical. Like, well, why did you start the account in the first place? Right. And what do you want from it? Like, it's not about likes. It's not about attention. What's it about? Right. And if you can keep your focus on what it's about, and it's getting the word out there, and minding your own recovery, that's part of your why, and why you began. I think there was some desire to have some accountability to the greater world beyond you, right? If I remember correctly.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And when you go back to your purpose and you go back to your why, like, that fear can come in and it can have a seat, come on in. I'm going to do it even while I'm scared, right? I might be scared. I might be terrified, and I'm going to do it anyway, because this isn't about my feelings. This is about my goal, and I'm going to work towards my goal.
And with that motivation, I've been able to meet a lot of really wonderful people that it's just crazy to think where I am now, and the people that have come in my life because of my higher power, that have put me on this path of recovery, and the people that I've met, just not even 4 months ago, I felt more alone than I've ever felt in my life, because I didn't know how to get myself out of the cycle of this addiction. And I didn't know who I could talk to. I didn't know who I could turn to. I didn't even know anything really about any of these social media groups that are available. And, when I finally started to work on that, and I dug and I found all these different groups, and some of the groups that I started out with, I'm not a part of now, because maybe at the beginning of my journey, they suited me. And I'm still early in my journey, but I've kind of transitioned to you kind of find different vibes in different groups, you know? And so I've just met a lot of wonderful, wonderful people. But with that comes, when you meet people and they're hot and heavy and ready to start their recovery, and you're just right there with them and you're excited with them, but then they slip back, or maybe they're not as committed in their recovery as like I am. Again, it's probably something we've talked about setting those kind of boundaries, with all these online communities, all these different energies, different levels of recovery, and just making sure that my recovery comes first. And so I've had to learn kind of this hard lesson of social media and recovery, just kind of boundaries, and, certain energies, you kind of have to learn to navigate.
Yeah, and let's not kid ourselves. That happens in the rooms too. You walk into a room of recovery, you build a friendship with someone, then they stop coming. And then they come back and they share an experience. And your mind very easily can go to, oh, shit, that could be me, right? And you could then begin to focus on like your potential for failure instead of your potential for success. And when we've got our eye on the people who are not recovering the same way we are, we really have to focus on us and our journey and our recovery, and not compare and contrast it, not judge someone else's recovery, but allow their recovery to be what it is. And remember how many times we slipped that we didn't tell anyone. I don't know about you, but I know for me that I lost count how many times I tried to quit all by myself, right? And I was super desperate and super committed to recovering the first time I entered a community of support, whether that be online or in person. And anytime I looked at evidence that I might not succeed, it did bring me down. So it is something that on social media can be really in your face because it can be a series of, like, somebody posts a slip, they have the courage to post a slip, and the next 5, 10 posts are me too, me too, me too. Oh, I did this, I did this, I did this. And then we're inundated with these messages of people having slips. And we have to be pretty intentional about stepping away from that, not making it mean anything about us or our recovery or our ability to succeed.
Whenever I would read stories, and I would even see stories of people popping up in there, let's say they're 2 years back free and then they slipped. And that can be very discouraging, because it's like, I'm doing all this work and I could possibly slip. But it's also a reminder to me that I'm going to be doing this work probably for the rest of my life. In some aspect, I'll probably continuously, revisit the steps. I will always be aware that I can never gamble again. I will never be able to control it, no matter how many years away from it I am. And so, these groups and things in social media, they have their pluses and they have their minuses. Just always be aware, that 2 years from now, I can all of a sudden have an urge, and just as long as it's always in my mind and I never get complacent, I'm hopeful. So
yeah, and I look at those posts a little bit differently. Of course, I'm in a different spot in my recovery journey, right? Those posts for me, I don't care how much clean time somebody's got under their belt, those posts for me are a reminder of how powerful addiction, no matter what you're addicted to, is, right? And I intentionally use the word slip instead of relapse, because whenever I say it in that context, I think out the acronym in my mind. Sobriety lost its priority. And it's a reminder to me that my version of sobriety needs to have priority in my life, or I'm at risk of that same thing happening to me. and then I also look at, okay, well, here's this other person I know from my meeting who slipped and slipped and slipped and slipped and kept on coming. And now look at them, you know, and now look at them. And when I talked to them about their slips, they stopped prioritizing recovery, whether that was meetings or sponsor conversations or intentional self-reflection time or therapy sessions, whatever it was, right? They got overwhelmed with life. They didn't have time for their recovery, and they weren't actively working to keep themselves in a recovery path.
Now, another thing that's kind of interesting to me about social media that's really actually pretty cool is meeting people from all over the world.
Yes.
And it's really, really interesting how connected we all are. I mean, you know, you hear their stories, and even though they're from a different country, or maybe, I think Australians call them like slots, they call them pokies, maybe.
I think that's
pokies.
the UK.
Or the UK. I mean, it's just so interesting because at first, you know, when I was learning about all the different addictions through the groups and things like that, like I didn't know that there were so many different ones, but I would see different names for different things, and it would just confuse me. And then I finally caught on, like I know the lingo now. I know kind of what they're talking about.
Right.
But so it's actually really interesting, and you know, just meeting all these kind, beautiful women who are struggling with this addiction, and you know, their lives are just as tough as the rest of ours. And so that's been kind of a beautiful thing, I think, if you can say anything beautiful of addiction, but it's a beautiful thing of recovery, that's for sure. Now, another thing too that I wanted to kind of talk about in this episode was the different types of gambling. Now, I was just straight casino slots. Like that's all I've ever done. That's all I've ever known. I've never even been a bingo player. Like I knew there were card tables. I knew kind of some of those things, but I've never played them. I didn't really know much about them. But when I started in these groups, people would talk about, you know, pool tabs, and I even have people that have messaged me from like Indonesia and Thailand, and they talk about like different types of animal fighting. And it's just this crazy world that I didn't even know existed until social media. So what are your thoughts on that?
I think so. I did a lot of betting. Like, if they took a bet, I would place a bet. Like everything but I think there were things I did not classify as gambling that I now classify as gambling. After after spending time in a program, learning about all the different ways that people did take risk and were compulsively placing a bet, essentially. And I played cards, I played poker, I played pull tabs, I threw in on the lotto, meaning like at work, they would be like, oh, look at the lottery, it's like blah, blah, million. And we're doing a pool, you know, I'm the girl that everyone else is putting in like $2. I'm like, oh, here's a 20, you know, like extra, everything was extra. Someone would say, want to bet? I'd be like, yeah, $5, you know, like any bet. And, you know, a game that normally you wouldn't bet on, I'd be like, how about $1 a point? You know, like I would create betting opportunity. And my compulsion, it's interesting, like looking back at it, it doesn't always have to involve money either, which was really new learning for me about how, you know, it's compulsive gambling, which when you think about compulsion and like the inability to control the thing and you're obsessing about it. And I'll give you an example. I think we paid like an entry fee, and there was a pot to be won. So I guess I shouldn't say no money, but it was a very minimal amount of money in order to play on this fantasy football team. And a lot of people don't think of fantasy teams as a form of gambling because you're really paying like an administration fee, essentially. And then there happens to be, a prize winning for whoever, right? First, second, third, whoever. I would Saturday, I'm all over evaluating the people that I need to put in my lineup. I don't do this anymore. This is years ago, but I entered a league and I obsessed about the draft and like who I was going to draft and who I was going to pick for my team. Every week I'm reading the sports journal. I'm not a sportsy person, like at heart. Like that's not really something I truly had passion for, but I'm reading the injury reports. I'm looking at the weather forecasts. This is like prior to doing my picking of who should be in my lineup for the weekend. And then Sunday would come and it's like the whole day, all day, all the commentators, all the pregame, every game, multiple TVs, obsessing over what was happening and if I got my 6 points, if I'm going to beat so and so, not for the prize, just for the intellect. Did I use my skill? Did I use my intelligence to predict the outcome? Fascinating when I look back on that I was so obsessed with that silly fantasy league. I don't know how many beautiful Sundays I sat inside staring at the damn television, or Monday nights I rushed home from work to see what was going on with Monday night's game.
I've never even thought of that. I've never even thought about that though, but even like with lottery tickets and like I've done lottery tickets. I noticed in the groups too that there's like lotto or scratch off addictions. People would buy stacks and stacks of. I didn't even know that was something that, I knew that I would see them occasionally. People kind of buy maybe, I don't know, $50 or $100, and it just never really dawned on me that could actually be an addiction. And I guess if you have a compulsive or addictive personality, I guess anything could really turn into that kind of an addiction. But yeah, it was really interesting to see all the different. And I know when I first had a conversation with you about it, you were like, "Oh, I've done all different types," and I'm like, "Well, how many types are there?" Because I just didn't know. But I still have a friend who's actually trying to recover from gambling, but she does still do the fantasy league. And she was like, I just can't seem to let that part go. Huh. But it's not about the money for her either.
Right.
So that's interesting.
Yeah, I felt very action-y then. And it's interesting, I wasn't really going to the casino at that time, not frequently. It was not something I did regularly. I had a similar experience as your friend, though. I was exposed to gambling pretty young, betting with potato chips like as a little kid. So I was exposed to it from a young age and also struggled with other addictive things, whether it was drugs or alcohol or sex, or probably not sex. I don't know that I would say I was addicted to sex, but I was addicted to the relationships or to love, right? Or chasing love, maybe chasing some form of validation. And I can look at the common thread through all of that. And the common thread is I was seeking some way to escape the feeling that I was feeling inside of myself, or to generate a new feeling, like a feeling of excitement. And gambling was the thing that really got me crawling into the rooms of recovery. But yes, I too have an addictive personality.
Yeah, and I've just learned a lot of different aspects of that. Like we all have a commonality of pretty much across the board with any addiction, that it's not something that we chose. It's not something that we want in our lives. And there's some form of commonality there, but they're so, like, the people that have these addictions, we're also different as far as what led us there, what kept us there, and it's been really kind of an eye-opening learning as I've progressed in my recovery, and just really pushed out and met so many different people, and with so many different types of gambling addiction. It's really just opened my eyes to a whole nother world that I didn't even know existed. And it's still it still surprises me too that it's still such a quiet addiction, because of the things that I've come across and read, and just all the people that you see, and if you look at the numbers and all that, it just really still surprises me as somebody like myself, who is a 15-year compulsive gambler, didn't even know 3/4 of the different types of gambling addictions there were, because it's not talked about. It's not made aware. So that's been a pretty interesting journey of discovery there.
Yeah, I find it fascinating too, this shift in even in our professional lives and the software we use for work, or something as simple as filling out a customer service survey. Like, everything's becoming a contest. We're building a culture of winning and a desire to win. And so, just like when you and I were gambling, like, who wants to talk about being a loser? Like, no one's talking about, not no one, right? We're talking about it. There's a number of awesome podcasts that are talking about it. We're bringing more awareness, hopefully, to the impact of this addiction. But so many, you and me included, people keep it a secret, and we hide in our shame. Meanwhile, all around us, we're watching this culture shift happen where it's all about winning. And I mean, even in social media, interactions in social media, that dopamine hit that we get from the like, or we get from the comment, or we get from the add a girl, nice post, or whatever, that too can be addicting. And then in our groups, badges, they're giving away badges. Oh, yay, you're a rising star, is something LinkedIn says. And then on Facebook, you're a conversation starter. Like, what, like, is it, we're trying to set goals around like earning badges in our online communities. And I was asked on my website, this is a silly thing that I don't have the community aspect turned on, but it's available to me. And it was like, do you want to enable member badges? And I was like, no, I don't want to give bonus points. There's none of that here.
And I never looked at it like you do. You've explained this to me before, but I've never looked at it like that. But I do know exactly what you're talking about that dopamine high when you post, and when you kind of get that atta girl, or, thank you so much, you're helping me so much. And then you're kind of like, yay. And then you kind of get this high. And then that's when I kind of realized I can't focus like that, because I'm exchanging one for another. And so it's very important, because then I would have the down rush, like if somebody didn't respond to something I posted, or it didn't get a lot of likes, or didn't get a lot of views. And, then I would get down, and I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like, I just need to focus on healing myself, and I'm going to put that journey out there. And if it resonates, it resonates. If it doesn't, it doesn't. It's just kind of one of those situations where my mindset is now. And actually, that's actually freed me up to be more myself in a weird way, because I'm not so scared of putting myself out there, because I do want to spread awareness. I do want people to know that they're not alone, and that they can start their recovery, as hard and confusing as it may seem. You can start it. And
there's thousands of people ready, willing, and able to
help
you. Waiting
exactly.
for you. Great. Literally saying that we're taking a moment to think about that person who hasn't found us yet. There's millions of people, really, if we think addiction broadly, millions of people waiting to help those who are suffering and struggling.
You see a lot of people, especially in social media, who have battled their own addiction, who's come out on the other side, who's come out stronger, and they're so inspiring. And and I think a lot of people are hesitant to reach out to those people. I know I was hesitant to reach out. If somebody would be like, well, message me and we can talk about it. I'm like, I don't want to talk about it. I'm not ready to talk about it, because then it makes it real. It makes it something that is a real problem. And, or you feel like you're inconveniencing them, or, that kind of thing. But really, most of us that are going through recovery, or come through a certain stage of recovery, we truly, as part of our service of giving back, we want to help others feel better about themselves and feel worthy. So
I don't want anyone in the world to feel the way I felt back then, right?
Exactly.
Even on the messy days, this is so much better. Yeah.
Okay. So as we're kind of wrapping things up, do you want to talk about your podcast and kind of what maybe you have in store for that?
Yeah, awesome. Happy to do so. Thanks for the opportunity to even highlight it. So, Ambitious Addicts podcast is about really three things. It's about addiction recovery. It's about ambition in recovery and going after our goals, both for life and recovery. And it's real life stories of recovery. So, tune in if you want to hear any of that. I also do have a Facebook group called Ambitious Women in Recovery. So, if you just went to Facebook, that's a community of women or people who identify as she, her, hers, can come in and have just a space where they can share privately among other women in recovery, no matter what you're recovering from.
But you are bringing in somebody that talks about energy and, just kind of different aspects and different spirituality when it comes to recovery.
You're
Right?
gonna get me so excited. Like I just get giddy when I think about the purpose of that group, right? Coaching I offer one-on-one. Coaching can be expensive, but I can share that with other people. And what I really want, right, as I said earlier, is for those women to know that they are deserving, worthy, and capable of dreaming the lives they dream of. And so that group is really talking about, like, what do you want? What do you want in your life? What's in the way? What's the obstacle? What do you have to learn? And there's quite a few people who struggle with their version of higher power. And there's so many versions. I don't care. I don't care what your version of higher power is. You want to explore an aspect that you think maybe could be your higher power? Come on, let's go. So I happen to know somebody who's an energy worker, spiritual, intuitive healer, and she's all about it, right? All about supporting other women. And that's what it's for. That is a community of support to support one another in the achievement of our goals together, no matter our past.
Absolutely. And I do love the idea of how energy plays into that. And so I'm actually really looking forward to delving into that a little bit with you. But so I just want to say I appreciate you so much. Really, you're an amazing part of my recovery and a huge part of why I am as far along as I am. So I just want to thank you for coming on the podcast. And do you want to put out your email or any way that you want anybody to reach you?
You can throw it in the show notes. You can find the website at ambitiousaddicts.com and the podcast. If you search Ambitious Addicts on the platform where you listen, you should find it. And if you don't, please let me know.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, hey,
All
before you let me go, I want
Mm-hmm.
to tell you that you're a meaningful part of my recovery too. And it's been an honor getting to know you. And I'm really excited to see how many lives you touch in this phase of early recovery that does need important, care and attention. And that's really where people often feel the most alone. So I'm so proud of you and excited to see what comes of this.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I'm really excited too about what's going to happen for the Broke Girl Society and see where we can help others. So, all right. Well, I guess we'll just call that an episode.
All right.
Thanks.